He said, "If you can't trust me with my ex, we're done." I said, "You're right." I sold our house and took the London job. When he texted, I sent a Heathrow selfie. True story. The text message glows on Harrison's phone screen like a neon warning sign in our pitch-black bedroom. It is exactly 5:47 in the morning. My hands are physically shaking under the heavy duvet as I stare at the device sitting on his nightstand. Valerie, his ex-wife. The message is short, but it carries a weight that presses down on my chest until I feel like I can hardly breathe. It reads, "Cannot wait to see you today. It has been way too long." I squeeze my eyes shut and force my breathing to stay steady, perfectly mimicking the rhythm of deep sleep. A few seconds later, Harrison stirs beside me. His arm reaches out from under the covers, his hand automatically feeling around for his phone like it is some kind of life support system. He does not reach for me. He does not roll over to wrap his arm around my waist like he used to do during our first few years of marriage. His first instinct, before his eyes are even fully open, is to check his messages. Through my barely opened eyelashes, I watch the soft, blue glow of the screen illuminate his face in the dark room. A slow, genuine smile spreads across his features. It is the kind of smile I have not seen directed at me in months. The kind of smile that reaches all the way up to his eyes, full of anticipation and pure, unfiltered joy. He types back quickly, his thumbs moving with a practiced, desperate familiarity. I cannot see what he is sending her, but his expression suggests it is loaded with a level of meaning and intimacy that I am completely excluded from. After hitting send, his entire demeanor shifts. He suddenly has the energy of a teenager getting ready for prom. He rolls out of bed, practically humming under his breath, and heads straight for the master bathroom. I lie there, completely frozen, listening to the shower run. I know exactly what is about to happen because this has been our routine for months now. I have exactly 20 minutes to lie in this bed and pretend I do not know what I know. 20 minutes to prepare myself for another day in his alternate reality. When he finally emerges from the bathroom, he is a completely different man. He is wearing the charcoal gray cashmere sweater I bought him for his birthday, the one that cost an absolute fortune, paired with dark designer jeans. He has spent at least 10 minutes styling his hair using products I rarely ever see him touch. But the worst part is the smell. The second he walks back into the bedroom, I catch a strong whiff of an incredibly expensive, rich cologne. It is a scent he usually reserves for black-tie corporate events or high-stakes client dinners. He leans over the bed and presses a quick, obligatory kiss to my forehead. His lips feel dry and entirely disconnected from the gesture. "Morning, Evelyn," he whispers, his voice carrying that forced, overly enthusiastic cheerfulness people use when they are trying to hide something massive. "You're up awfully early for a Sunday," I murmur, keeping my voice groggy and non-committal. I turn my face into my pillow, giving him the space to continue whatever theatrical performance he is currently staging. "Yeah, just grabbing a quick coffee with Valerie," he says casually, adjusting his expensive watch in the mirror. "You know how it is. She is still having a rough time adjusting to the city. I promised I would help her talk through some career stuff before my afternoon golf game." Right. At 6 o'clock in the morning. On a Sunday. Dressed like he is about to step onto a red carpet. I say nothing, just nodding against the mattress as he grabs his keys and walks out the door. The sound of his car pulling out of the driveway feels like a physical blow, leaving me alone in the massive, echoing silence of our home. Once I am absolutely sure he is gone, I drag myself out of bed and walk downstairs. The morning light is just starting to stream through the custom floor-to-ceiling windows of our living room. We live in a gorgeous, historic neighborhood in Boston. Hardwood floors, marble countertops in the kitchen, a beautifully landscaped backyard. To anyone looking from the outside, Harrison and I are the ultimate success story. We're the couple that other people envy at dinner parties, the ones who seem to have completely cracked the code on having it all. But as I stand in the middle of my perfect kitchen, pouring hot water into my coffee mug, everything around me feels like evidence of a crime. This house does not just represent a marriage, it represents my entire life's work. Let me give you a little context. I did not grow up with money. My mother was a single parent who worked double shifts just to keep our electricity from getting shut off. I spent my entire 20s working like an absolute machine. I took 0 vacations, worked 80-hour weeks, and poured every ounce of my energy into my career in corporate marketing. By the time I was 27, before I even met Harrison, I bought this house. The deed is in my name. The mortgage is in my name. I paid the massive down payment with money I bled for. When Harrison and I got married 4 years ago, he moved in. He makes decent money in finance, sure, but he grew accustomed to my lifestyle very quickly. He loved the prestige of the neighborhood. He loved hosting his colleagues in my custom kitchen. I loved him so much that I never once made him feel like it was my house. It was ours. I wanted to build a beautiful life with him, brick by expensive brick. I sit down at the kitchen island and open my laptop. There is an email sitting at the very top of my inbox from the executive board of my company. The subject line reads, "Final consideration, European Division Director." My stomach does a complicated flip as I open it. They want me to move to London to head the entire European branch of our firm. It comes with full creative control, an incredible relocation package, and a base salary of $160,000 a year, not including massive bonuses. This is the 3rd time they have offered it to me in the past 6 months. And just like the previous 2 times, my first instinct is to hit delete. Accepting that job would mean leaving Boston. It would mean uprooting Harrison from his comfortable finance job, disrupting the perfect life we built together, and forcing a massive transition on our marriage. For months, I have been actively sabotaging my own career advancement because I wanted to be a good wife. I wanted to prioritize our stability over my ambition. But as I sit in the quiet house, smelling the lingering trace of the cologne Harrison wore to go see his ex-wife at dawn, the urge to delete the email vanishes. I do not reply, but I leave the email sitting right there in my inbox. A tiny, terrifying seed of realization starts to take root in my mind. The life I am sacrificing my dreams to protect might not actually exist anymore. It did not start with dawn text messages and expensive cologne. It never does. If Harrison had come to me 3 months ago and said, "I am going to start spending every single Sunday with my ex-wife," I would have packed his bags right then and there. But cheaters do not operate like that. They boil you alive slowly, turning up the heat 1 degree at a time until you do not even realize you are burning. It started exactly 3 months ago, on a random Tuesday evening. Harrison and I were sitting on the couch, drinking wine and watching a movie, completely relaxed. His phone buzzed, and instead of hiding it, he actually leaned over and showed the screen to me. It was a message from Valerie announcing she was moving back to Boston after her photography career in New York completely imploded. "Wow," Harrison had said, shaking his head with a look of genuine pity. "Valerie is back in town. She says she is really struggling with the transition." She asked if I could grab a quick coffee to catch up and give her some advice on the local job market. I remember that moment so clearly. I remember feeling a surge of pride. I wanted to be the secure, mature, modern wife. I did not want to be the paranoid, jealous woman who banned her husband from speaking to an ex from a decade ago. After all, he was showing me the text. He was being transparent. What could possibly go wrong with a single cup of coffee in broad daylight? "Of course you should go," I had told him, smiling warmly. "It sounds like she is going through a really hard time. Just let me know how it goes." That first Sunday, he dressed normally. Baggy sweatpants, an old t-shirt, 0 hair product. He was gone for exactly 1 hour and 15 minutes. When he came back, he casually complained about how chaotic Valerie's life was, telling me stories about her messy apartment hunt and her scattered career goals. I listened, offered some sympathetic words, and we moved on with our day. It felt entirely innocent. But then, one coffee turned into a weekly standing appointment. 1 hour stretched into 3 hours. The sweatpants were replaced by nice jeans. The casual complaints about her messy life evolved into deep, passionate monologues about her unrecognized artistic genius. Harrison suddenly became an absolute expert in the competitive art world, passionately defending Valerie's creative vision. When I gently suggested that maybe we should invite Valerie over for dinner so I could properly meet her, Harrison's entire demeanor had turned icy. "She is very private right now, Evelyn," he had said, using his serious, corporate negotiation voice. "She is going through a highly sensitive, fragile transition. A formal dinner party would just overwhelm her. Maybe once she is more settled." That should have been my absolute final warning. In 4 years of marriage, Harrison had never once been fiercely protective of anyone's emotional privacy except his own. But I loved him. I trusted the man who stood in front of 200 of our friends and family members and promised to put me first for the rest of his life. I let him convince me that I was helping him do a good deed. I let him weaponize my trust and my desire to be a supportive partner against me. I gave him an inch, and he took my entire marriage. By the end of the second month, the boundaries had been pushed so far that I could not even see the original starting line. The Sunday morning coffees had become an untouchable sacred ritual, but the real psychological torture began when the phone calls started creeping into our nights. It was always around 10 o'clock at night. We would be settling into bed, reading or watching television, finally having a quiet moment to ourselves. Then his phone would vibrate on the nightstand. Harrison would glance at the screen, and I would watch his posture instantly stiffen. "Sorry, it is Valerie. She is having a crisis with a gallery owner." "I need to take this," he would say, already throwing off the blankets and practically sprinting toward the bedroom door. He would step out into our backyard garden, sliding the glass door shut behind him. He thought I could not hear him, but sound travels perfectly through the crisp Boston night air. I would lie there alone in our massive bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the muffled rise and fall of his voice. At first, the calls were 20 minutes long. Then they stretched to 30, then 45. I found myself obsessively checking the clock, timing his absences. The most painful part was not the duration. It was the tone. Through the glass, I could hear him laughing. It was a deep, genuine, delighted laughter that echoed in the quiet yard. I realized with a sickening drop in my stomach that I could not remember the last time he laughed like that with me. When he spoke to her, his voice was gentle, incredibly patient, and dripping with an intimacy that made me feel physically ill. When he finally returned to the bedroom, the air between us would freeze. He was always vague, tossing around words like industry connections and career anxiety. When I finally gathered the courage to tell him that talking to his ex-wife for an hour in the middle of the night made me deeply uncomfortable, he turned the situation entirely around on me. "Evelyn, you do not understand," he said, looking at me with a mixture of disappointment and exhaustion. "Valerie is incredibly fragile right now. Her entire life is falling apart. She just needs someone who understands her history to help anchor her. I cannot just abandon someone who is in the middle of a mental health crisis." Fragile. That was his favorite word for her. He used Valerie's supposed emotional fragility as a shield to deflect any criticism. If I asked him to stop the calls, I was not just a jealous wife. I was a heartless monster demanding he abandon a broken woman. He framed his emotional affair as a noble rescue mission, making me the villain for wanting my husband to actually be present in our marriage. After 3 weeks of listening to him pace the garden and whisper to another woman under the moonlight, my mental health began to crack. I could not sleep. I could not eat. I could not stand the feeling of lying next to a man who was counting down the minutes until his phone buzzed again. So, I packed up a small bag of my clothes and moved into the guest room down the hall. I told myself it was because his phone calls were keeping me awake for work. But deep down, I wanted him to fight for me. I wanted him to see me leaving our shared bed, realize he was pushing me away, and beg me to come back. He did not. The first night I slept in the guest room, Harrison simply nodded, said good night, and closed the door. I lay in the cold, unfamiliar sheets, crying silently until the sun came up, realizing that he was probably relieved to have the master bedroom all to himself so he could talk to Valerie without having to lower his voice. Once you start noticing the lies, they begin to multiply like a virus. It starts with the big things, like the late-night phone calls, but then it bleeds into the mundane, everyday details of your shared life. It was a chilly Tuesday evening, and I was doing a deep clean of our closets. I was moving Harrison's heavy winter coats when I realized something was wrong. His favorite vintage leather jacket, the one he practically lived in during the autumn, was completely missing. I searched the hallway closet, the guest room, and even his car. Nothing. While I was looking, I also noticed that a very specific navy blue wool scarf I had bought him during a business trip to Paris was gone as well. When Harrison came home from work, I tried to keep my voice light and casual. "Hey, have you seen your leather jacket? Or that blue scarf? I am trying to organize the winter wear, and I cannot find them anywhere." He did not even look up from his laptop. He typed a quick sentence before casually waving his hand. "Oh yeah. I dropped them off at the dry cleaner down the street last week. The jacket needed some special conditioning, and I spilled coffee on the scarf." It was such a smooth, effortless lie. Most wives would have just nodded and gone back to cooking dinner. But I was no longer operating like a normal wife. I was operating like a detective trapped in my own home. The next day on my lunch break, I drove specifically to Somerset Cleaners, the local spot we had been using for the entire 4 years we lived in the neighborhood. The owner, a sweet older woman named Maria, who always remembered our names, smiled brightly when I walked in. "Hi, Evelyn. We do not have anything ready for you today, sweetie," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "Actually, Maria, I am just checking on a couple of items Harrison dropped off last week." "A leather jacket and a navy scarf?" He lost the ticket. Maria frowned, tapping her manicured fingers on her computer keyboard. She checked the system, then physically walked to the back to check the racks. She came back shaking her head. "I am sorry, Evelyn. I have not seen Harrison in over a month. He definitely did not drop a leather jacket off here." I stood in the middle of the warm, chemical-smelling shop, feeling the floor completely drop out from under me. I thanked her, walked back to my car, and locked the doors. I sat staring at the steering wheel, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. It was not about a jacket. It was not about a scarf. It was the horrifying realization that my husband had a secondary location. His belongings were slowly migrating to another reality. He was leaving pieces of his life over at Valerie's apartment, getting comfortable enough to leave his outerwear behind. My husband was essentially living a double life, and he was lying straight to my face with the chilling ease of a psychopath. The isolation of being gaslighted by your own husband is a very specific type of hell. You start questioning your own memory, your own sanity, and your own worth. Desperate for a reality check, I reached out to my friend Courtney. We met for lunch at a high-end bistro downtown. I needed someone to look me in the eye and tell me that I was not crazy, that what Harrison was doing was completely unacceptable. I poured my heart out over salads we barely touched. I told her about the morning texts, the midnight garden pacing, the move to the guest room, and the blatant lie about the dry cleaner. I expected outrage. I expected her to fiercely defend me. Instead, Courtney delicately wiped her mouth with a linen napkin, gave me a deeply patronizing smile, and sighed. "Evelyn, sweetie, I think you need to take a deep breath," she said, her voice dripping with toxic positivity. "You are letting your anxiety run completely wild. Look at it objectively. Harrison is an amazing provider. He is just trying to be a good person to someone from his past. It shows real emotional maturity that he can maintain a platonic friendship with his ex." I stared at her, completely stunned. "He is lying to me about where his clothes are, Courtney. He is spending hours whispering to her in the dark. How is that emotional maturity?" Courtney leaned forward, lowering her voice like she was sharing a profound secret. "Men have egos. If you back him into a corner and act like an insecure, jealous wife, you are going to drive him right into her arms. You need to be the cool, supportive wife. Do not make a big deal out of the clothes. Just let him get this hero complex out of his system. If you cannot trust him, maybe the problem is your own insecurity." I left that lunch feeling 1,000 times worse than when I arrived. The drive home was a blur of tears and suffocating panic. Courtney's words echoed in my head, reinforcing everything Harrison had been telling me. You are insecure. You are jealous. You are the problem. That is the absolute terror of emotional abuse. The gaslighting works best when your own friends and family help hold the lighter. For a few dark days, I actually convinced myself that they were right. I told myself I was overreacting. I tried to force a smile when Harrison walked out the door the next Sunday. I tried to swallow the burning acid in my throat and pretend I was the cool, emotionally evolved wife everyone demanded I be. But pretending does not change the truth. And the truth was about to hit me like a freight train, destroying any remaining illusion I had left. Thank you for watching. If you are enjoying the story so far, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below telling us which city you are watching from. Every single comment helps the video reach more viewers, and we truly appreciate your support. The turning point did not happen in a screaming match. It happened in absolute, suffocating silence on a Thursday morning. Harrison had left for work, and I decided to take control. If my own friends were going to tell me I was crazy, I needed cold, hard data. I sat down at our dining room table, the very table we had custom ordered from Italy, and opened my laptop. I pulled up our joint banking statements and the credit card records for the past 3 months. I am a data analyst by nature. In marketing, if you want to know the truth about a campaign, you follow the money. So, I applied that exact same logic to my marriage. I started cross-referencing the dates of Harrison's emergency crisis meetings with Valerie against the charges on his credit card. The numbers told a story that completely shattered the fragile illusion I had been holding on to. On a Sunday, when he told me they grabbed quick sandwiches at a local deli, there was a charge for $180 at an upscale seafood restaurant downtown. 2 weeks later, on an afternoon he claimed they spent walking through the public botanical gardens discussing her resume, there was a massive charge for premium tickets to an exclusive, invite-only art gallery exhibition. But the most damning charge of all was from a boutique hotel in the city center. It was a charge from their lobby bar, time-stamped at 11 o'clock at night. That was the exact same night he swore he had stayed late at the office to finish a quarterly report. I printed out the statements. I highlighted the charges in bright yellow ink. When Harrison came home that evening, loosening his tie and pouring himself a glass of expensive bourbon, I slid the papers across the marble kitchen island. $180 for sandwiches? I asked, my voice terrifyingly calm. He looked down at the paper. I watched his face closely, waiting for the panic, waiting for the guilt. There was absolutely none. His reaction was so immediate, so unbelievably smooth, that it chilled me to the bone. Oh, that, he said, taking a casual sip of his bourbon. That was not just us. Valerie ran into some old gallery owners she knew from New York. I ended up picking up the check for the table as a networking courtesy. You know how important those connections are in the creative industry. I pointed to the hotel bar charge. And this? You told me you were at the office. He did not even blink. I was. But Valerie called me in an absolute panic because a potential client wanted to meet her for drinks at that hotel, and she felt totally out of her depth. I rushed over there for 30 minutes just to help her navigate the conversation. I paid for their drinks so she would look professional. Evelyn, why are you auditing my credit card? This is incredibly toxic behavior. Every lie built perfectly on top of the previous one. His voice carried the total confidence of someone who had practiced these explanations in the mirror. He had an answer for everything. That was the exact moment I realized I was arguing with a ghost. The man standing in my kitchen was not my partner. He was an adversary. You cannot negotiate with a liar who believes his own lies. The intense, burning sadness in my chest evaporated, leaving behind a cold, calculating clarity. I was done asking questions. The universe has a funny way of giving you the exact evidence you need, precisely when you stop looking for it. A few days after the bank statement incident, I was in our front yard planting fresh tulip bulbs. I needed the physical labor to clear my head. Getting my hands dirty in the soil felt grounding. Mrs. Gable, our elderly neighbor who has lived on the street for 40 years, was walking her golden retriever. She stopped by our white picket fence, leaning over to admire my gardening. We made polite small talk about the weather and the neighborhood association before she smiled warmly. "Your husband certainly has a romantic side, Evelyn," she said casually. "I saw him last Sunday afternoon walking through the public park near the river." My hands stopped moving. The dirt under my fingernails suddenly felt very cold. "Oh? Did you say hello?" "No, I did not want to interrupt," she chuckled, adjusting her glasses. He was with a lovely brunette woman. They were holding hands and walking so closely, they looked like newlyweds. "It is so nice to see you two still keeping the romance alive." She thought Valerie was me. I managed to force a polite smile, thanked her for the compliment, and went inside. Holding hands in the park. Not a career crisis meeting. Not a networking event. A romantic stroll. That night, unable to sleep, I gave into the darkest temptation of the digital age. I found Valerie's Instagram account. It was completely public. Her feed was an artfully curated grid of bohemian aesthetic, moody black and white photos, vintage coffee cups, unmade beds. I scrolled through weeks of her life, my thumb moving with the mechanical persistence of someone picking at a fresh wound. Then I saw it. It was a photo posted 3 days ago. Valerie was standing in front of an exposed brick wall at an art gallery. She was wearing a sleek black dress, holding a glass of champagne, smiling directly into the camera. But my eyes immediately locked onto her ears. She was wearing my grandmother's vintage pearl earrings. They had an incredibly intricate, custom silver setting that was completely unique. Those earrings had been in my family since 1952. My mother gave them to me on my wedding day. 2 weeks ago, Harrison had borrowed them, claiming he needed them for a corporate photo shoot showcasing family heirlooms for a high-net-worth client brochure. I had carefully handed them over in their velvet box. And now, they were dangling from the ears of his ex-wife. I zoomed in on the screen until the image pixelated, but there was no mistaking them. Harrison had stolen my family history to play dress-up with his mistress. This was no longer just an emotional affair. This was an invasion. He had taken something sacred, something that belonged to the women in my bloodline who had actually worked hard and suffered, and handed it to a woman who was actively helping him destroy my life. The tears I had been holding back for 3 months completely dried up. My heart stopped breaking and turned into pure ice. I needed a strategic ally. I could not go to Courtney or any of our mutual friends in the neighborhood. They were too invested in the illusion of our perfect Boston marriage. So, I called Donovan. Donovan was my business partner at the marketing firm, a brilliant data strategist who read people the same way he read consumer algorithms. We met at an all-night diner on the edge of the city. The fluorescent lights hummed above our heads as I spread my phone and the printed bank statements across the table. I laid out everything: the timelines, the lies, Mrs. Gable's testimony, and the photograph of the stolen pearl earrings. Donovan examined the evidence in total silence. He drank his black coffee, his expression growing darker by the minute. When I finally finished presenting my case, I waited for him to tell me I was crazy. I waited for him to offer some logical alternative. Instead, he reached into his briefcase, pulled out his own laptop, and turned the screen toward me. "I noticed you were distracted at work," Donovan said quietly. "So I did what we do best. I ran a background digital sweep on her public profiles." "Evelyn, you missed the worst part." He clicked open a folder on his desktop. "Valerie is a photographer. For the past 2 months, she has been updating a digital portfolio series. She titled it New Beginnings." Donovan scrolled through the high-resolution images. My breath hitched in my throat. Every single photograph was taken at a specific location in Boston. But they were not just random tourist spots. They were my spots. There was a beautiful, moody shot of the corner booth at the hidden speakeasy where Harrison and I had our first date. There was a bright, airy photo of the exact antique shop where we bought our dining room chandelier. There was a picture of the boutique bakery where we ordered our wedding cake. "She is systematically documenting their dates," Donovan explained, his voice gentle but firm. "But look at the locations, Evelyn. He is not just taking her out. He is taking her on a tour of your marriage." He is overwriting your shared history with her. Seeing my life captured through her artistic lens made me physically nauseous. This was not a tragic accident of two people falling back in love. This was calculated. Valerie was deliberately creating a visual record of replacing me, location by location, memory by memory. Donovan closed the laptop. He looked me dead in the eye. You know exactly what this is, do you not? You're the smartest woman I know. Do not let him treat you like a fool. Hearing Donovan validate my reality was the final piece of the puzzle. He did not tell me to communicate better. He did not tell me to be emotionally mature. He showed me the truth. My marriage was completely, utterly dead. Now, it was just a matter of deciding how to bury it. October 15th arrived with bitter, freezing rain. It was a perfectly miserable day for a perfectly miserable milestone. It was our 4th wedding anniversary. The day we stood in front of God and promised to choose each other every single day. I woke up alone in the guest room. I walked downstairs to the kitchen, half expecting to see a bouquet of flowers or a card on the counter. A tiny, pathetic part of me wondered if maybe today would be the day he woke up, remembered his vows, and fought for us. There was nothing. The kitchen counter was spotless and empty. Harrison emerged from the master bedroom an hour later, dressed in a sharp blazer. He was wearing the silver watch I had bought him for our 1st anniversary. He poured his coffee, checked his phone, and grabbed his keys. Hey, he said briskly. I have to run out for a few hours. Valerie is having a meltdown over her portfolio review. I need to walk her through the presentation. I will see you later tonight. He did not even wait for my response before the door clicked shut behind him. He had completely forgotten. He was so deeply invested in managing the imaginary crises of his ex-wife that he had completely erased our anniversary from his brain. I stood in the silent house, surrounded by the beautiful, expensive things we had collected together. I walked into the living room and looked at our framed wedding photo on the mantel. The young woman in that picture looked so hopeful, so incredibly certain that she was safe. I felt a profound wave of grief, not for the man who just walked out the door, but for the girl in the picture who had no idea what was coming. I walked upstairs to my home office. I opened my laptop and pulled up the email from my executive board, the offer to head the European division in London. For months, I had been the anchor holding Harrison's life in place. I paid the mortgage. I managed the household. I sacrificed my own upward mobility so he could have a stable foundation while he played savior to another woman. Safety is an illusion when you are slowly drowning. And I had been holding my breath for so long, I had forgotten what oxygen tasted like. I hit the reply button. My fingers moved over the keyboard with absolute, unshakable certainty. I am officially accepting the position of European Division Director. I am ready to begin the transition immediately. Please send over the relocation documents. I will see you in London. I hit send. It was the most terrifying, exhilarating moment of my entire life. I had finally chosen myself. The geographic fortress of London was waiting for me, an ocean away from the toxicity of this house. The executive board responded within 2 hours. They were thrilled. They wanted me to start in exactly 3 weeks. 21 days to completely dismantle a life I had spent my entire adult years building. What followed was the most highly coordinated covert operation of my existence. I continued to sleep in the guest room. I continued to eat dinner across from Harrison, asking him about his day, nodding politely while he spun elaborate fables about his innocent meetings with Valerie. I gave him absolutely nothing to be suspicious of. But during the day, while he was at his corporate finance job, I was ruthlessly tearing the structural foundation of his life out from underneath him. I hired a cutthroat, incredibly efficient real estate agent. She came to the house while Harrison was at work. We walked through the rooms, and she gave me an aggressive listing price. Because my name was the only one on the deed and the mortgage, the process was seamless. I signed the paperwork to list the house as a private, off-market sale, targeting wealthy cash buyers who wanted to move fast. Next, I met with my lawyers. They drafted a perfectly legal, airtight document that would serve as the ultimate reality check. A 30-day eviction notice. I rented a secret, climate-controlled storage unit 2 towns over. Every single day, I would pack a few boxes of my most precious belongings, family photos, important documents, the art I had purchased before we met. I moved them out to my car and drove them to the unit. I left all of Harrison's belongings exactly where they were. I even left the furniture arranged perfectly so he would not notice the empty spaces in the closets. It is a very strange feeling, actively destroying your own home. But with every box I moved, my chest felt lighter. I was no longer a victim waiting for her husband to decide her worth. I was the architect of my own escape. I stopped caring when he took his midnight phone calls. I stopped caring when he smelled like that expensive cologne. I stopped caring because the man sleeping down the hall was about to become a ghost in my past. It was my final Sunday in Boston. The trap was fully set, the paperwork was signed, and my flight to London was booked for Monday morning. Harrison, entirely oblivious to the ticking time bomb under his feet, was standing in the hallway mirror, adjusting the collar of his cashmere sweater. He was getting ready for his standing Sunday appointment with Valerie. I walked down the stairs, carrying a cup of coffee. I decided to give him one final, definitive test. One last chance for the universe to prove me wrong. "Harrison," I said, my voice soft and deliberate. "Do not go today. Stay home with me. Let us drive up the coast, just the two of us. I really need you today." His reaction was immediate and visceral. His face contorted into a mask of active irritation, like I had just asked him to cancel a $1 million deal. He turned away from the mirror, his posture defensive and aggressive. "Evelyn, we have been over this 100 times," he snapped, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "Valerie is dealing with a massive crisis with her landlord. She is fragile right now. I cannot just abandon her because you suddenly want to go on a spontaneous road trip." "I am your wife," I replied, keeping my tone perfectly even. "And I am asking you to prioritize me." He squared his shoulders, looking at me with the cold, calculating eyes of a businessman negotiating a hostile takeover. He thought he held all the cards. He thought my request was born out of desperate, pathetic jealousy. He decided to play his final trump card, an ultimatum designed to silence me permanently. "I am going to say this once, Evelyn," he said, his voice dropping into a dangerous, authoritative register. "Valerie and I are friends. If you cannot handle that, that is your problem. If you cannot trust me spending every weekend with my ex-wife, maybe we should not be together at all." The silence in the hallway was deafening. The grandfather clock ticked in the background. The morning sun illuminated the dust motes floating in the air between us. He waited for the tears. He expected me to crumble, to apologize for being needy, to beg him not to leave me. He expected me to shrink back into the obedient, supportive wife role he had constructed for me. I looked him dead in the eyes. I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no sorrow, no fear. Just cold, absolute certainty. "You are absolutely right," I said. The change in his facial expression was a masterpiece. The arrogant confidence vanished in a fraction of a second, replaced by pure, unadulterated confusion. His brain could not process the data. It was like watching a computer system completely crash. "Wait," he stammered, taking a step toward me. "That is not. I mean, we should talk about this. I was just trying to make a point." "The point is made, Harrison. Have a great time with Valerie." I turned my back on him, walked up the stairs, and closed my bedroom door. I left him standing frozen in the hallway, dressed for a date with his mistress, realizing he had just accidentally blown up his own marriage. Monday morning arrived with a heavy, gray Boston downpour. The kind of weather that washes everything completely clean. I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I pulled my final 2 massive suitcases from the closet and laid them on the bed. Harrison had slept on the couch downstairs. I could hear him moving around the kitchen, his footsteps heavy and hesitant. He was attempting damage control. When I finally walked downstairs, fully dressed for international travel, he was standing by the coffee maker, looking exhausted and thoroughly panicked. "Evelyn, please," he started, his voice cracking. "About yesterday. I was way out of line. I was stressed. I did not mean what I said about us not being together. Let us just sit down and figure this out." I walked past him, opened the refrigerator, and took out a bottle of water. There is nothing to figure out, Harrison. I already figured it out. He looked down at my travel boots, then toward the hallway where my two massive suitcases were sitting by the front door. The panic in his eyes escalated to sheer terror. What are those? Where are you going? I am going to London, I said calmly, taking a sip of water. I accepted the position as European Division Director 3 weeks ago. My flight leaves in 4 hours. He grabbed the edge of the marble island to steady himself. You cannot be serious. You cannot just leave the country. What about our life? What about the house? I smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of an executioner pulling the lever. Yes. The house, I said smoothly. The house is officially going on the market this Friday. My real estate agent already has 3 cash buyers lined up for private viewings. All the blood violently drained from his face. He looked like he was going to vomit. You cannot sell our home. Where am I supposed to go? It is not our home, Harrison. It is my home. I bought it. My name is the only one on the deed. My lawyers will be couriering your official 30-day eviction notice to your office this afternoon. You have 1 month to pack your things and find a new place to live. The total financial reality crashed down on him like a concrete block. He had spent 4 years living a luxury lifestyle subsidized entirely by my hard work. Without my income, without this house, he was nothing but a mid-level finance guy who could not afford to live in this zip code. You cannot do this to me, he whispered, completely broken. You did it to yourself, I replied. I grabbed the handles of my suitcases, walked out the front door, and stepped into the waiting town car without looking back. Logan International Airport was chaotic, filled with business travelers and families, but I felt like I was floating through it in a bubble of absolute peace. I checked my bags, cleared security, and sat down at my gate. Through the massive glass windows, I watched the giant commercial jets preparing for takeoff. My phone vibrated in my hand. It was a text from Harrison. Evelyn, please. I am begging you. Do not get on that plane. What are you doing this weekend? Come home. We can go to marriage counseling. I will cut contact with Valerie. Please. A month ago, that text would have been my ultimate fantasy. It was everything I had wanted to hear. The begging, the promises, the prioritization. But reading it now, it just looked pathetic. It was not born out of love. It was born out of survival. He was not terrified of losing me. He was terrified of losing the house, the money, and the comfortable life I provided. I stood up and walked over to the massive digital departure board glowing with international destinations. Paris, Rome, Amsterdam, London. I held up my phone, framing my face perfectly with the word London glowing in bright yellow letters right behind my head. I gave the camera a huge, genuine, radiant smile. It was the first real smile I had produced in almost half a year. I made sure my boarding pass was clearly visible in the corner of the frame. I snapped the selfie. I attached the photo to a message thread with Harrison. I typed exactly 4 words. Starting my new life. I hit send. I stared at the screen until the tiny gray text appeared below the bubble confirming it was delivered. Then, with a profound sense of finality, I swiped down my settings menu and tapped the airplane icon. The cellular signal vanished. The connection was completely severed. 20 minutes later, I was strapped into my seat as the plane accelerated down the runway. As the wheels lifted off the tarmac, leaving the city of Boston and the wreckage of my marriage thousands of feet below, I leaned my head against the window. I did not shed a single tear over the Atlantic Ocean. I was finally free. 6 months later, the sky above London was a brilliant, clear blue. My flat in the city center was modern, filled with light, and belonged entirely to me. The European division of the marketing firm was thriving under my leadership, and I had built a new, vibrant life completely free of gaslighting and manipulation. But karma is an incredibly thorough worker, and it rarely leaves loose ends. I received a completely unexpected notification on LinkedIn of all places. It was a message from Valerie. She asked if we could meet for a coffee, noting she was in London visiting family. Curiosity won out over my lingering resentment, and I agreed to meet her at a busy cafe in Covent Garden. When she walked in, she looked nothing like the confident, bohemian artist I had stalked on Instagram. She looked exhausted, diminished, and deeply, incredibly sad. She sat across from me, wrapping her hands around her tea mug like she was freezing. "I wanted to apologize," Valerie said, her voice shaking slightly. "I know you owe me nothing, but I needed to look you in the eye and say I am sorry." I took a slow sip of my coffee, waiting for her to continue. "Harrison played both of us, Evelyn," she explained, looking down at the table. "He told me that your marriage had been completely dead for over a year. He swore you guys were basically just roommates staying together for financial reasons, and that you were waiting for a good time to file the divorce papers. He told me he was miserable." The audacity was breathtaking. "And you believed him?" I asked quietly. "I wanted to," she admitted, tears welling in her eyes. "He made me feel like I was saving him. But the second you actually left, the second he lost the house and the money, his entire mask slipped. He became completely unhinged. He blamed me for losing his luxurious lifestyle. The emotional support he promised me vanished overnight." She went on to tell me about her new photography series. "After I left Boston, she realized she had been used as an ego boost for a narcissist. She created a new digital gallery titled False Starts, stark, depressing images of empty coffee cups and abandoned dinner tables. The romantic fantasy he sold her had completely imploded." "Where is he now?" I asked, though I already knew I did not care. "He is renting a tiny, miserable one-bedroom apartment in a bad neighborhood," Valerie said, wiping her eyes. "He is completely alone. He tried to crawl back to me after you sold the house, but I blocked his number." The irony was absolutely perfect. The man who needed constant validation from two different women to stroke his massive ego had ended up with absolutely no one. He had gambled his entire life on the assumption that I would always stay, and he lost everything. I walked out of that cafe into the bustling London streets feeling lighter than air. Sometimes, the universe does you the ultimate favor by revealing exactly who a person is. Harrison showed me he was a coward who would choose ego over partnership. And in doing so, he forced me to become a woman who refuses to accept anything less than she deserves. I finally chose myself, and it was the greatest decision I have ever made. Looking back, selling the house from under him without warning and serving him an eviction notice was a brutal move, but it was the only way to protect my financial security from a man who used my life to fund his fantasies. Some of our old friends, like Courtney, said I went too far by leaving him essentially homeless and taking the London job in secret. What do you think? Was I right to execute my escape plan the way I did, or should I have given him a chance to explain himself after his ultimatum? Drop your verdict in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell to hear more incredible stories of revenge, karma, and people finally choosing themselves. See you in the next video.